All right, there we are. If you ever see me join and then leave again, it's because I forgot to sign in. And for some reason, it doesn't record audio when I'm not signed in. Dun, dun, dun. All right, so we were pretty much here. Right, so the plan was for you all to finish or fill out that Punnett square, right, that we started drawing on Monday. So hopefully you've all done that. And what I'm going to do now is give you a practice, because the whole saying of practice makes perfect really does apply to this kind of stuff. Okay, so we have, and this is the same one that I gave class yesterday. And for some reason, I always come back to dwarfs. It might be like some subconscious thing I have about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs or something. I don't know. But anyway, we're going to have, I'm sorry about my enormous hands. My camera's just there, right, instead of up here, which is always a bit weird. Freaks people out, makes people think I have enormous hands. So anyway, grumpy dwarfs are crossed with happy non-dwarfs. Maybe that's Snow White when she's woken up. To give grumpy dwarfs. Question 1. What are the dominant, I can spell it right, phenotypes? Question 2, question 1 should be pretty straightforward. What are the phenotype combinations and, pardon me, and ratios in the F2? Okay, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes, maybe, shouldn't take you longer than that, to essentially write out that cross, right? And so what I want to get across is that you can take, once you fully understand this, you can take shortcuts, right? You could probably just write out the answers to those questions without even doing the cross if you really understand what you're doing. But you don't really want to do that until you fully understand it, because you might make mistakes. So while you do that, I'm going to go clean off the whiteboard and see what you got. Obviously, if you have any questions during the process, give me a shout. I'm going to drink some water.
Professor, I just hooked into the video. What are we doing?
So we're going to be doing a dihybrid cross using the information that I've given you in the chat box.
Okay.
I'll give you like another 5 minutes or so, and then we'll go through it all together on the whiteboard.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. And if that Rebecca is Rebecca Stout, I have to say she has the cutest dog I've ever seen.
Thank you.
You mind if I share that picture?
Oh no, she if anybody else is in Mr. Penny's lab, they might
Oh.
possibly see her dressed that way.
Let me go to my cats and dog pics folder. Let's see. I've got quite a lot of pictures in there. Where is that?
Well, you've got
Oh,
some cute puppos yourself.
yeah, but boy, nothing compared to this. All right, give me a second. I couldn't stop looking at it. Yeah. I know this is going to be distracting everybody, so sorry about that. But
Did your wife and kids find it cute?
my wife thought it was a joke, like photoshopped. Look at
Oh.
that, everybody. That has to be the cutest dog ever. Anyway,
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
no worries. Yeah, adorably cute. Oh, yeah, I'd better do a little bit more distracting. Where's this was mine as a, well, my second one as a puppy.
Oh my god.
Yeah, she is super, super adorable. And someone, one of my students over the summer made that, which I thought was really neat as well. So she's actually Dr. Pepper.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah,
That- That's mint.
that made me laugh. And as you can see, lots and lots of cat and dog pics. Anyway, I'm distracting you all. So get back to dihybrid cross, much more important. It's a dihybrid cross. We have two different traits. We have we have, well, how would you put it? Life outlook. I don't know. Maybe that's one thing. And then you have height. So it's definitely a dihybrid cross. I mean, unless you want to assume that grumpiness is inherent in being a dwarf, right? And the seven dwarfs shows that it's not true because there's also happy. Can't believe I'm using Disney princess movie as a justification for a dihybrid cross in genetics, but there you go. Funnier things that happened at sea, so they say. That's the dwarf versus non-dwarf. Sorry, I should have been super clear about that, but yeah, it's a dihybrid cross. Because we shouldn't assume that dwarfs are going to be grumpy, right? Because that'd be wrong. Still can't get over that King Spaniel. Whenever I'm feeling kind of sad or grumpy or whatever, I'm just going to look at that picture. That'll make me feel better. Guaranteed. So remember in a both monohybrid and dihybrid cross, Isaiah, you have P1 generation, right, which are going to be homozygous, either dominant or recessive. You have the F1 generation, which are always going to be heterozygous, and then you have the F2 generation. So I've given you the P1 and the F1. You need to use the phenotypes of the F1 to answer question 1, and then you need to work out the offspring of two F1s, which will give you the F2.
Would you mind sharing the first bit about the phenotypes and stuff that you put in the chat? Because I'm having a hard time getting the chat to work properly and I can't
Sure.
see it. Thank you.
No worries. Let's do this up on the board. Where are the pens?
Oh, by the way, later when you go home, you can tell your wife and kids that the hardest thing to make was her little lab coat.
I wonder where you got that from.
I had to make it.
That is really awesome. Okay, so practice. We have grumpy dwarfs times happy non-dwarfs. So I'm not sure what the word is for someone who isn't a dwarf.
You could put elf.
Oh, yeah, but then you're kind of starting to confuse different traits, right? So like pointy ears versus height. Don't
Yeah.
want to, that'd be a tri-hybrid cross. Don't want to do
Yeah.
that. So this will give you grumpy dwarfs, P1, F1, F2. That's a cross.
Okay.
So question 1, what are the dominant phenotypes? Question 2, what are the phenotype combinations and ratios in the F2?
Okay.
Cool. All right, give everybody a few more minutes. Don't want to spend too much time on this, partly because we have another test cross practice for 2 genes, and then we need to get on to PowerPoint 4, about probability and statistics, because we need to finish that up by Friday. Yeah. Ooh, Labor Day next Monday. Awesome. Get a lie in. Okay, so 2 more minutes, speedy time, and then we'll go through it. Okay, so is everybody done? Yeah, no more coffee. Speak now, or forever hold your peace, as they say. Okay. I'm going to assume that if you haven't finished, you're close enough. Okay. Question 1. What are the dominant phenotypes?
Being grumpy and being a dwarf.
Grumpy and dwarf. Awesome. Thank you, Isaiah and Stephanie. 100% correct. How do you know?
Because if you cross it, when you cross the grumpy dwarves with the happy dwarf, I mean the happy non-dwarves, you get grumpy dwarves, and the only way that's possible is if being grumpy was dominant, and if being dwarf was dominant.
Awesome. And so what's the genotype of the F1s?
Oh, it's hold on. Oh, it's G.
Oh, you don't have to worry about letters.
Oh, it's 2.
2. Yeah, Stephanie's got it right. But what's the word you're looking for?
Trying to remember the word.
Begins with H and E.
Hybrid.
No.
No wait.
H-E-T. E.
Heterozygous.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we'll use those letters. That works too. So these have to be heterozygous. I'm gonna fit that in there because they're the offspring of 2 homozygous individuals, right? That's the only, and we know that because that's what it is in a dihybrid and monohybrid cross, right? There's your kind of rigid formula, right? So okay, easy peasy. What possible gametes can we get from our F1s in terms of alleles? Bang, you fast, Stephanie. It's like you're tapped into my brain. Okay, Melody. So look at what you wrote. Some of those are right, some of them are not. Which one's wrong? 2 of them are right, even though you've swapped the order for the third one. Which one's wrong? Right. Why?
Right, that was an accident. I was like, oh shoot, that was a mistake. Sorry.
That's all right.
But no, because it's not. It wouldn't be crossed right.
Well, because it's,
Yeah.
for one, it's diploid, right? It has 2 copies of the same allele, and it's a gamete. Gametes are always haploid. And the second is, and I know it's a typo, but I'm just using it as a mean to kind of get the point across. Second reason is you've lost the grumpy gene,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you have
Sorry,
to have
that
one
was-
allele for each. Cool.
Okay.
And again, not kind of picking on you, but it's a common mistake to make, right? I want to make sure that everybody is on the same page with that, right? So we have dominant, we have dominant recessive, we have recessive dominant, and we have recessive, right? Those are the 4 possible gametes. And because we have a F1 on the other side, the other parent of the cross, we do the same. And I tend to write out in this order. It doesn't actually matter because you're going to be reading from the Punnett square. It's just habit, really, more than anything else. Oh, another quick question. Again, revision. What ratio do we have these gametes in? If we have, say, 100 gametes, for whatever reason, how many of each of those would we expect to get? If we have 100 gametes, how many of each gamete would we expect if we have 4 different types of gametes?
25%.
Yeah, exactly. 25% of each, or 1-to-1 to 1-to-1 ratio, or 25, 25, 25, doesn't matter, right? An equal number of each of these, right? Because of one, random segregation of alleles. So for Grumpy, which allele the gamete gets is random, right? So essentially it's 50-50 dominant to recessive Grumpy, 50-50 dominant to recessive dwarf-ish, I guess. Second, law of independent assortment states that the Grumpy gene has absolutely no effect on the dwarf gene. So what allele you get for Grumpy or not has nothing to do with what allele you get for dwarf or not, right? That's the law of independent assortment. So I'm just going to rip through this. And this doesn't take long once you get the idea of what you're doing. And again, as I said before, technically, once you know what you're doing, you don't need to do this at all, because you'll already know the answer. But just the same as the kind of stat stuff that we've done in lab, or we will be doing today, if this is your first lab, or even maybe tomorrow, Dr. Penny, or Mr. Penny rather. Practice and theory. Oops. Aha, you see, I make mistakes too. Thankfully, I had my laptop tipped up so you didn't see it. Got to read what's there. All right. So there you go. So you're going to have 4 different phenotype combinations. We're going to have the ones that we saw in the parents, which are grumpy dwarfs and happy non-dwarfs. Starting to run out of space here. Take my magnets over. Whatever that is. And then we have 2 new combinations, which are not seen in the P1 or the F1. And that's going to be one of these, grumpy, and one of these, non-dwarfs. And because every time we get a different combination, we have to have what's called the reciprocal, right? So if you have grumpy non-dwarfs, then you have to have the opposite, which is happy dwarfs. Make sense? Okay, so reading off of this, all of these have a dominant allele, right, for each gene. Doesn't matter how many dominant alleles they have, as long as they have one for each. Count those up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's our 9. The lone one down here is our double homozygous recessive. That's 1. And then we have grumpy non-dwarf, grumpy non-dwarf, grumpy non-dwarf. That's 3. And then happy dwarf is 3. And that's what gets us our 9-to-3 to 3-to-1 ratio. Does everybody get that? Hey, you get to see what my ceiling looks like. Cool. I'm going to take a picture and then we'll quickly do another test cross, because I want to hammer that home too. All right. Okay, let me quickly rub this off. All right. Test cross practice. Now we're going to do something a little different, right? The ones that we've done already are 1 gene test crosses. We're going to up the ante, so to speak, and do a 2 gene test cross using the same made up examples that we've just used. So we have a grumpy dwarf. What possible genotypes could that grumpy dwarf have? We already know that it's the dominant phenotype for both of those traits. So what are the possible genotypes that that individual could have? So we'll get you thinking. Well, you missed a letter there, Stephanie. So we have homozygous dominant. We have heterozygous. All right, what else do we have? You're missing 2. Think about what makes the dominant phenotype. Presence of a dominant allele. So you only need 1. But now we have 2 genes. So they have to be homozygous dominant or heterozygous for both of those. The answer is no. So what other genotypes can you get? Yeah, try and keep the same order though, Stephanie, because otherwise you'll confuse yourself. So we've got, oh, confuse me too. It's just kind of like one of those habits, really. Good habits, I guess. So we've got heterozygous for grumpy, homozygous for dwarfishness. And what's the reciprocal of that? Yeah, exactly. Good stuff. So we have, all right. So we have 4 possible genotypes. What are we going to cross this grumpy dwarf with to figure out which of those we have? What's going to be the, yeah, so we're going to have a homozygous recessive tester, and that is going to be a happy non-dwarf. Awesome. Okay, so now we're cooking. Start with the easy stuff. Gametes from this individual. What's the only gamete that you can get in terms of alleles? Good stuff. Thank you, Alex Ray. Okay, start with the next easiest one. What's the only gametes you're going to get from this individual? Yeah, good, good. Now, and I'm going to draw little dashes to separate those. What alleles can you get from this individual? Good. So you break it down. You can only get a D, but you can get a dominant or a recessive G. Same deal for these. But now it's, you're only going to get the dominant G. You can get the dominant D or the recessive D. All right. What about for these? Ooh, I want to put a space there, Melody.
I keep trying to be like faster and I just
This is a test of your typing skills. Like how quickly can you find those letters? Okay, so yes, both Melody and Isaiah, you've partially got it right, but you also need the others as well, which Stephanie put. So we have these 4 alleles. Not 4 alleles, 4 gametes, sorry. Okay. Now we know, because of the law of independent assortment and the law of segregation, we're going to get a 1-to-1 ratio of these, 1-to-1 ratio of these, and a 1-to-1-to-1-to-1 ratio of these. Now, what would you expect in terms of progeny if this one grumpy dwarf was homozygous dominant for both? What progeny would you get and what ratios? That actually last bit was a bit of a trick. So we're going to cross. Hang on. Oh, hang on. Yes. Not all 4. There's only 2 traits, remember? So you're going to get both dominant traits. So with this one, because you're essentially going to get all of your individuals will be heterozygous, you're going to have 100% grumpy dwarfs. And this is actually kind of a good way of getting into that statistic stuff. What are you going to get if your individual is heterozygous for grumpy, homozygous dominant for dwarf? First off, what ratio are you going to get? This is 100%. Alex-Ray, awesome. Yes, 1-to-1, not 3-to-1, because remember, we're crossing this individual with this individual over here, right? So the 3-to-1 ratio is what you'll get if you cross 2 heterozygotes together in a monohybrid cross. A, this is 2 genes, not 1. And B, this is not a mono or a dihybrid cross. This is a test cross, right? So that 3-to-1 ratio, you shouldn't see it ever other than in an F2 generation of a monohybrid cross, right? That's like one of those absolutes, in a sense, about as absolute as you can get in biology. Right, so we're going to get a 1-to-1 ratio because we have a 1-to-1 ratio in the gametes. What are the phenotypes that we're going to get? So which one is going to be the same for both of them? Which one do you have the same allele for both of them?
The dwarf.
The dwarf, right? So you're going to have dwarf. Yep, because you have a dominant D for both. Isaiah, your answer would be correct for the second one, third one maybe. And now you're going to have either the dominant or the recessive allele for grumpiness. And so if it's dominant plus recessive, going to be heterozygous, right? So this will be grumpy dwarf. What's that? It's going to be that. And this one will be the opposite because it will be that. And the same for this, 1-to-1. Now we're going to flip it around. So it's not going to be, they're not going to both be dwarfs. They're going to be both grumpy. And either dwarf or non-dwarf, because this will be heterozygous for both. This will be heterozygous for grumpy and homozygous recessive for dwarf. Now, I'm not going to go through this one, but this is even in a way, it's simpler. What ratio do we have for the offspring if it's heterozygous for both? You look at the other ones, you can kind of get a clue there. So how many different combinations are we going to have in the offspring? Yeah, exactly. You're going to have 4 different combinations, thanks Alexa, and the ratio will be 1 to 1 to 1, because you're going to have an equal number of these gametes, just as you do from the F1s in a dihybrid cross. Same reason, right? Heterozygous for both. And so you'll get the same 4 different phenotype combinations as you would get from a dihybrid cross in the F2, but they're going to be in a 1 to 1 to 1 ratio. Okay, so this may be a little over complex for some, and I don't want you to get like super confused. But what I really want to emphasize is when you get a question and it says, okay, we're crossing what looks like, well, essentially dominant with recessive, right? You're going to say, okay, is this a dihybrid cross where you have dominant by recessive, or is it a test cross? What do you then look for? You look for the progeny of those 2 individuals. If it's a dihybrid, all of those progeny will be heterozygous and display the 2 dominant phenotypes of the dominant parent. If you get, say, a 1 to 1 or a 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 ratio, that instantly tells you this is a test cross, right? And the ratio that you get will tell you the genotype of the dominant parent. Okay, so keep your eyes open for that. Essentially, when you're, this thing weighs a lot when you hold it up for a while. When you come across these questions, and there will be plenty of questions on this stuff, because in many ways you can kind of guess what's going to be on the exam based on how much time we spend on something in class, right? We spend a bunch of time on this. So when you get a question with a cross in it and data, let's say, in terms of progeny produced, you need to look for some things, right? What information do I have? Do I have has he given me 2 generations? And then the ratio of the 3rd one, dihybrid cross or monohybrid cross. Has he just given me 1 cross with the progeny? That's a test cross. What ratios am I looking at, right? Do I have a 3 to 1? That's a monohybrid cross. Do I have a 9 to 3 to 3 to 1? It's a dihybrid cross. Do I have something else? Almost certainly that's a test cross, right? And so that will help you when you see those, right? Because they're somewhat wordy because I need to give you all the information. But when you see those, you'll be able to go, I got this. I know exactly what he's asking me about. And I know what the possible answers are. Does that make sense? Cool. So with the idea with a little bit of practice, and I recommend you practice these so you get them like quick, is you can just look at them and go, I know that. That's the information I need. That's the information I need. And that's the information I need. Bang, bang, bang. That's the answer. Otherwise, you'll be stuck kind of working through every single point. You might not fully understand it. It's going to take you a long time. It's going to slow you down in the exam, right? Which might not let you answer other questions just because of time, right? So I can never remember what's in the homeworks. I'd look at them occasionally. I think there's practice in the homeworks, but I'll double check, Stephanie. If not, questions at the end of the textbook chapters, or you can just make these up, right? I mean, that's what I do. I kind of have more practice, I guess, but the principles are exactly the same. You can just change around the phenotypes and traits and stuff like that, make up your own. If you have a particular, fun animal or something that you like dragons, for example, like one of my daughters is nuts about, use those. But yeah, so practice yourself, test yourself, and also test others as well. So if you can get together with other students and just kind of make up something like I have and give it to them and say, okay, work it out, then that will help you a great deal too. Just practice, practice, practice. Cool. All right. So that's pretty much it for Mendelian genetics. That took a little longer than I expected, but that's okay, because hopefully that will have helped you all, right? That's the aim of the game at the end of the day. And, whoa, we're not going to start with that. All right. Oof. Get off of that. Don't want to scare you. So really what this is about, and I'll just give you an overview essentially today. I'm going to get too deep into it because of time. Essentially, Mendelian genetics gives us the framework to work out probabilities in terms of inheritance, right? If we know the genotype of two parents, then we can work out the probability that any given individual will have a certain phenotype or phenotypes, right? And this is obviously something that has a lot of application to, working out the probability that your child may have a particular recessive disease, depending on the genotype of the parents, right? Also, oh, I'm sorry, copy's wearing off. That's one thing. It also allows us to think about multiple individuals, right? In terms of, well, if you have two kids, what's the possibility that one of them will have this disease? Or, other kind of stuff like that. The other application of this, which we'll get to later on in the PowerPoint on the subject, is these probabilities and our understanding of them, right? How you get certain probabilities out. We're going to use those and we're going to compare what we actually get in terms of data, like real world observed empirical data. We can then compare those data and see how closely they fit our expected outcomes in terms of probabilities, right? So if you do a cross and you expect, let's say a 1-to-1 to 1-to-1 ratio in terms of outcome, and you get 50, 48, 52, and 49, right? Does that actually match what you expect closely enough for you to go, yeah, I pretty much got what I expected, right? So that's the two kind of applications of this. And in many ways, it's kind of a real world sort of deal. So in terms of probability, what we're going to be covering are three different things. One, essentially independent events, right? So what's the probability of getting multiple independent events or multiple independent outcomes? So the classic example here is flipping a coin or rolling the die, right? And so when we talk about independent events, we have to think about, well, does the outcome of this event have any effect on the outcome of a second event? Right. So if you flip a coin once and get a certain result, does that have any effect on the result you get for the second event? The answer is obviously no. Right. Having children is another good example. Me mostly. Right. So whatever sex your first child is should have absolutely no impact on the sex of your second child. Right. Unless something like funky's going on in your ancestry, which is possible. I've had students that have told me that, you know, their family tree is nothing but like males or females, like going back. Anyway, and then we have to think about what's the right word? Mutually exclusive events. Right. And so essentially that means that if you have this particular outcome, you cannot have a different one. Right. So if your child is male, it can't be female. Right. Or if it's female, it can't be male. Or if, you know, whatever, right, it has a particular genotype, it can't have a different genotype. Right. Those are exclusive. Right. So the presence of one particular outcome excludes the possibility of other ones. Right. And those two independent and exclusive events are dealt with very, very differently. Right. So essentially, I kind of think of it like a slot machine or a roulette table. Have you ever seen one of those? I haven't. Anyway, the probability of winning one-hander poker, or, you know, a one-armed bandit or something, in theory, has absolutely no effect on whether or not you win the second time. And so the probability of winning both times is much smaller than winning the first and not the second, or not winning and then winning, because you've got two different events. Both of those have to work. Whereas the mutually exclusive, you kind of add them up. And we'll get to that in detail as well. And then we can actually use those, and this is really what we're looking at here, to figure out orders of events, right? What's the particular probability of, let's say, a certain birth order, right? Or what's the probability of getting a boy and two girls if you have 3 children, things like that. That's what we're going to go through. So what I'd suggest, as you know, always, go through this PowerPoint, have a read through it. Some of it will make sense, some of it won't. And then we're going to go pretty quickly through the first stuff, right? So I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on that because I need to get this done by the end of Friday's class. And then we're going to go and spend a lot more time on the chi-squared test, right? Which I think there's a practice in the homeworks, but this is something that we'll also be doing in lab as well. Cool. And there you go. 50 minutes is done. Time flies when you're having fun and looking at pictures of cute dogs. Okay, so as always, if you have questions, bring them with you on Friday about any of this stuff. I want to make sure I catch them before the exam, because the first exam is, you probably don't want me to tell you this, but it's a good idea. Wednesday the 15th. So we have a little bit of time in the schedule for catch up, and we'll see whether we need that for catching up or if we can use that for like Q&A stuff. All right. So I'll see some of you in lab in a little bit, section 04. And the rest of you, I'll see you on Friday.
See you on Friday.